I became increasingly frustrated at not being able to express what I wanted to convey in letters that I wrote, especially those to Mr. Elijah Muhammad. In the street, I had been the most articulate hustler out there. I had commanded attention when I said something. But now, trying to write simple English, I not only wasn't articulate, I wasn't even functional. How would I how would I sound writing in slang the way I would say it? Something such as, "Look, Daddy, let me pull your coat about a cat, Elijah Muhammad." Many who today hear me somewhere in person or on television, or those who read something I've said, will think I went to school far beyond the eighth grade. This impression is due entirely to my prison studies. It had really begun back in the Charlestown prison when Bimby first made me feel envy of his stock of knowledge. Bimby had always taken charge of any conversation he was in, and I had tried to emulate him. But every book I picked up had a few sentences which didn't contain anywhere from one to nearly all of the words that might as well have been in Chinese. When I just skipped those words, of course, I really ended up with little idea of what the book said. So I had come to the Norfolk prison colony still going through only book reading motions. Pretty soon I would have quit even these motions unless I had received the motivation that I did. I saw that the best thing I could do was get a hold of a dictionary, to study, to learn some words. I was lucky enough to reason also that I should try to improve my penmanship. It was sad. I couldn't even write in a straight line. It was both ideas together that moved me to request a dictionary along with some tablets and pencils from the Norfolk Prison Colony School. I spent 2 days just rifling uncertainly through the dictionary's pages. I'd never realized so many words existed. I didn't know which words I needed to learn. Finally, just to start some kind of action, I began copying. In my slow, painstaking, ragged handwriting, I copied into my tablet everything printed on that first page, down to the punctuation marks. I believe it took me a day. Then, aloud, I read back to myself everything I'd written on the tablet. Over and over, aloud, to myself, I read my own handwriting. I woke up the next morning thinking about those words, immensely proud to realize that not only had I written so much at one time, but I'd written words that I never knew were in the world. Moreover, with a little effort, I also could remember what many of these words meant. I reviewed the words whose meanings I didn't remember. Funny thing, from the dictionary first page right now, that aardvark springs to mind. The dictionary had a picture of it, a long-tailed, long-eared, burrowing African mammal which lives off termites caught by sticking out its tongue as an anteater does for ants. I was so fascinated that I went on. I copied the dictionary's next page, and the same experience came when I studied that. With every succeeding page, I also learned of people and places and events from history. Actually, the dictionary is like a miniature encyclopedia. Finally, the dictionary's A section had filled the whole tablet, and I went on into the B's. That was the way I started copying what eventually became the entire dictionary. It went a lot faster after so much practice helped me to pick up handwriting speed. Between what I wrote in my tablet and writing letters, during the rest of my time in prison, I would guess I wrote 1,000,000 words. I suppose it was inevitable that as my word base broadened, I could, for the first time, pick up a book and read and now begin to understand what the book was saying. Anyone who has read a great deal can imagine the new world that opened. Let me tell you something. From then until I left that prison, in every free moment I had, if I was not reading in the library, I was reading on my bunk. You couldn't have gotten me out of books with a wedge. Between Mr. Muhammad's teachings, my correspondence, my visitors, usually Ella and Reginald, and my reading of books, months passed without my even thinking about being imprisoned. In fact, up to then, I have never had been so I never had been so truly free in my life. As you can imagine, especially in a prison where there was a heavy emphasis on rehabilitation, an inmate was smiled upon if he demonstrated an unusually intense interest in books. There was a sizable number of well read inmates, especially the popular debaters. Some were said by many to be practically walking encyclopedias. They were almost celebrities. No university would ask any student to devour literature as I did when this new world opened up to me, of being able to read and understand. I read more in my room than in the library itself. An inmate who was known to read a lot could check out more than the permitted maximum number of books. I preferred reading in the total isolation of my own room. When I had progressed to really serious reading, every night at about 10 p.m., I would be outraged with the lights out. It always seemed to catch me right in the middle of something engrossing. Fortunately, right outside my door was a corridor light that cast a glow into my room. The glow was enough to read by once my eyes adjusted to it, so when lights out came, I would sit on the floor where I could continue reading in that glow. At 1 hour intervals, the night guards paced past every room. Each time I heard the approaching footsteps, I jumped into bed and feigned sleep. And as soon as the guard passed, I got back out of bed onto the floor area of that light glow where I could read for another 50 minutes until the guard approached again. That went on until 3 or 4 every morning. 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night was enough for me. Often in the years in the streets, I had slept less than that. In my own case, once I heard of the glorious history of the black man, I took special pains to hunt in the library for books that would inform me on details about black history. I can remember accurately the very first set of books that really impressed me. I have since bought that set of books and have it at home for my children to read as they grow up. It's called Wonders of the World. It's full of pictures of archaeological finds, statues that depict usually non-European people. I found books like Will Durant's Story of Civilization. I read H.G. Wells' Outline of History. Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois gave me a glimpse into the black people's history before they came to this country. Carter G. Woodson's Negro History opened my eyes about black empires before the black slave was brought to the United States and the early Negro struggles for freedom. I read how entering India, 500 million deeply religious brown people, the British white man by 1759, through promises, trickery, and manipulations, controlled much of India through Great Britain's East India Company. The parasitical British administration kept tentacling out to half of the subcontinent. In 1857, some of the desperate people of India finally mutinied, and, accepting the African slave trade, nowhere has history recorded any more unnecessary, bestial, and ruthless human carnage than the British suppression of the non-white Indian people. Over 115 million African blacks, close to the 1930s population of the United States, were murdered or enslaved during the slave trade. And I read how, when the slave market was glutted, the cannibalistic white powers of Europe next carved up as their colonies the richest areas of the black continent. And Europe's chancelleries for the next century played a chess game of naked exploitation and power from Cape Horn to Cairo. Christian traders sent into China millions of pounds of opium. By 1839, so many of the Chinese were addicts that China's desperate government destroyed 20,000 chests of opium. The first Opium War was promptly declared by the white man. Imagine declaring war upon someone who objects to being narcotized. The Chinese were severely beaten with Chinese-invented gunpowder. The Treaty of Nanking made China pay the British white man for the destroyed opium, forced open China's major ports to British trade, forced China to abandon Hong Kong, fixed China's import tariffs so low that cheap British articles soon flooded in, maiming China's industrial development. I have often reflected upon the new vistas that reading opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. I certainly wasn't seeking any degree the way a college confers a status symbol upon its students. My homemade education gave me, with every additional book that I read, a little bit more sensitivity to the deafness, dumbness, and blindness that was afflicting the black race in America. Not long ago, an English writer telephoned me from London asking questions. One was, "What's your alma mater?" I told him, "Books." You will never catch me with a free 15 minutes in which I'm not studying something I feel might be able to help the black man.